My old friend Erik, a lawyer from Canada with explicit knowledge into mixed martial arts. And you gotta understand, I gave Erik a bump yesterday, but I've been talking to Erik on Twitter, and we're definitely not insulting one another. And I only say that because I would never bring in a civilian. I would never bring in you. I would never bring you in and give you the business. I would never give you the what for and not give you a chance to respond. And Erik went into a different category by full disclosure by me. One, because he's involved with MMA. Now, he's absolutely no help. I mean, he does not know which way is up, but I hold him to a different standard. One, because of his involvement, but two, because he's a lawyer. If you have opinions that are ridiculous, you're welcome to them. If a lawyer is involved who understands contracts, at least in theory, and who understands the importance of certain words, and he comes out and he starts speaking not only inappropriately, but you're either wrong or you're misleading. And being wrong or misleading is a very generous way of telling a lawyer from Canada in the MMA business who has never done anything to contribute that he's dishonest. And dishonest isn't nice, and I don't want to say that to him. He hasn't been nasty to me. I don't want to say that. But I did, when I laid this out for yesterday, I did tell Erik that if you'd like to send me a video, right? I don't have ability to have a guest over here. If you'd like to send me a video, give me a one-way exactly like I'm doing, I will post it in its entirety, uninterrupted, onto the same platform I'm posting this, which is YouTube. That offer is good. And I believe that Erik appreciated that. We're not being nasty to each other. I will share with you, it's very hard, like when I just made a statement now that he's been of no use to MMA. That's a mean thing to say, isn't it? I mean, that's a mean thing to say. He's given up his time. He's in it every day. He's got 67,000 tweets out there. But he's never made $1 in MMA. He's never made $1 for somebody else in MMA. And he's never invested $1 in MMA. He never risked $1. He is speaking 67,000 times, largely about MMA. About what somebody else should be doing with their dollars. But he never made one and he never invested one. Now that might sound familiar to a lot of you, but a lot of you aren't lawyers. With a dedicated time and believing that you should be heard and believing that you have an insight and believing that you have a greater knowledge while being wrong non-stop. Now, Erik could come out, and again, if you guys had done this, I'd let it slide. It's a verbiage issue, but he's a lawyer. And he came out and he stated, and you must understand, okay, you must understand, I've told Erik this many times, he's not been right once. It'd be different if he puts out 10 things and I'm the hall monitor and I catch him, right? Like, obviously, Erik isn't going to know what I know about the sport, obviously. He's an outsider look, he's doing his best. Obviously, he isn't going to know, but he's very involved in the class action lawsuit, and that shouldn't have to pertain to the sport. That is a law, and you either understand that law, and you understand precedents, and you understand what's happening here, and you can attempt to bring in this situation of which if you're going to be effective, go right ahead. But that isn't the situation. It is constantly, while talking about the class action, talking about the intricacies within the business of MMA, of which he's never made $1, but he's also never risked $1. He has never been under contract with anybody, but he's also never signed anybody to a contract. He has nothing to do with this. And when I tell you he hasn't been right yet, right? Like, obviously he's not going to know what I'm going to know, but we could still work together. It would seem that there'd be some things that he would know that would be new to me as well. We could seem we could work together. But if you put out 10 tweets, you got to have 1 or 2 of them right. So I set him straight. And I just called him out on some things. Hey, maybe you're getting a little loose with your verbiage. Maybe you're busy. Maybe, maybe you're not doing it. You're advertising yourself as a lawyer. You're looking nice. You're putting out tweets constantly. You're putting up legal statutes. It seems to me that you're working in some degree, at least intent-wise, in a capacity. But if I'm wrong, and this is your personal time, and you're half-corked when you're doing it, we could reconsider this, right? But that's not the way I'm interpreting it. So he comes out and he says that the UFC, Dana White, needs to co-promote and bring us Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones. Now, if that were just an opinion that you'd really like to see it, of course I wouldn't touch that. I'd have to take on about 100,000 of you. And then I'd have to start yelling at myself, right? Like, I'd watch that match. Sure, Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou, sure. But he brought it from a standpoint that there's a responsibility to do the right thing, right? He's all about being ethical, and he's about being moral. He's about doing the right thing. And he's never correct. And he's always talking about what somebody else should do with their money, of which he's made none and of which he's invested none. Now, that doesn't make him wrong wholeheartedly, but is a very interesting thing as a lawyer. Saying that Dana White, that one person, Dana White, needs to make Francis and Jon Jones happen. So I let him know that Dana White cannot contact Francis Ngannou about a fight. He cannot do it. Francis is under contract. It's a federal crime known as interfering with a contractual agreement. It doesn't get tested very often. And if a guy tells you no, it's really not likely to go anywhere. But this is a lawyer. This is a very known law. And Dana White cannot contact Francis Ngannou about doing a fight with Jon Jones or otherwise. Now, again, if you were not a lawyer, and that was just a way of speaking, which meant pursue the fight. Of course, there's channels you could go through, of course. You can always have representatives contact counterparts at different companies. You can also always feel something out. You can also begin a discussion under the person that has the contractual agreement. Sure, you could. But that isn't what he said, and he's a lawyer. I just call him out. I just let him know, hey, hold on a second. Before you're putting all of this on Dana, which all started with Francis. Francis said, it's the UFC's fault I didn't fight Jones. We both wanted the fight. Of which this lawyer is co-signing that agreement and saying that it should still be done. It's one of these things where you're just scratching your head and you're going, okay, first off, we had them both under contract, so the fight could have been done. You forfeit the right to say we both wanted to do it and the promoter stopped us. You forfeited that as soon as you're not willing to honor the agreement that you have. And Francis was not. Now, he's not alone. Jon wasn't either. But you forfeit the right to say that. So now that they're gone, and it's clearly not going to happen, to have a lawyer come in and say that it's Dana and that Dana should go to Francis, I'm correcting him, it's semantics. But Dana cannot go to Francis and try to get him to fight, okay? No more than somebody could come to your wife and marry her. There's steps in between. It's illegal. I hope that's an example that you understood. And while it would appear that we're arguing semantics, wouldn't you know, I was right. Erik's gone back to Twitter. It's exactly what he was saying. In fact, he says to me in his YouTube channel, Chael here, suggest it would be illegal, in quotation marks. Again, now see, he's doing the same thing to me that I did to him. I'm picking on very specific grammar because that's the level that we should be talking at. So he's doing to me what I'm doing to him. So I did have it right. To approach Francis for a co-promoted bout against Jon Jones. He is living in an opposite world, Erik says. According to a court document, the UFC antitrust suit refusal to co-promote is an illicit practice, and then he attaches the verbiage. There's not a word of what he said that's accurate. And by the way, he attached the verbiage. It's like, there's not a word that he said that's accurate. Dana White cannot contact Francis Ngannou. Have I made that clear? Have I made that perfectly clear to you? Because I made it clear to him, he said that I'm wrong and that I'm living in an opposite world. I want to stop you right there. That can't happen. But if you would like to debate it, go right ahead. And he did want to, and he supplied the evidence. If you read what he attached, there's no part of that. There's no part of it that would go against what I said. And believe me when I tell you, no, they can't. And for some reason, he has chosen that the UFC's the bad guy here. But let's just say he did it the other way. Let's just say as an attorney, he wasn't looking to get in somebody else's pockets or cause any kind of problems. He was trying to get a deal done, right? He's an attorney in MMA, and he's going to try to get deals done. Well, then let's just do it the other way. Just have the PFL go to Jon Jones and try to get a co-promote with Francis. And if they were your clients and this was your lawyer, he'd go, whoa, don't do that. You can't do it. You cannot do it. You cannot go. Anyway, I've made my point. I want to move on with Erik here. Because then Erik states that when I tell you guys he's never been right, like this isn't a joke. I didn't read 67,000 tweets, for heaven's sakes. But I read a lot of them. He isn't never right. So he then weighs in, again, on the co-promote. And he checks boxes. Francis Ngannou, in. Jon Jones, in. PFL, in. Dana White, that's the big one that's missing. And then he said that Dana White is ducking. Everybody's on board, but Dana White is ducking. And this is another word much like illegal, much like approach. It has a definition. It's being used by a lawyer. So he said that it's ducking. Now, you must understand, this is a guy that has nothing to do with MMA other than being an outsider looking in who couldn't get there. So now he's coming to try to burn the house down. It's a very common thing, but even that didn't work. It will not turn into $1. The good news is he won't have to risk $1. But he has now stated that Dana is ducking. Okay. There's a definition that comes with ducking. Do you understand that? To duck something. There ain't one of you that are watching this that can handle me. Can we agree on that? Oh. But there ain't one of you out there watching this that's ducked me. There's not one of you that could say I ducked you. Why? Because you weren't offered a fight with me, and I wasn't offered a fight with you. If you're not offered, it's not possible. You can't duck. The lawyer said he did. Said he's doing it right now. Lawyer went even further to say, Chael, there was a co-promote. By God. Of course he ducked him. To have an offer, Erik, lawyer from Canada, you need to have a date. You need to have a venue. You need to have a specified event. You need to have a fee. You need to have it all in writing that comes with an expiration date. You have until X. All of these things must exist. This is basic contract law for basic contracts, not just a unique niche sport like this. Dana White was presented with none of those things. So by definition, it's not possible that he ducked. Now, while Erik is weighing in, right? And he's never right. And his biggest argument, like everybody's, with the class action, is we're not being paid enough money. Fighters aren't being paid enough money. Well, that's a very sweet thing to say. You have no hand in this, and you just see and think we should be paid more money. That's a very nice thing. Not to mention that's going to be popular. That's going to hold up. I mean, every 4 years we have an election with somebody telling you what the priorities are and what we can afford, and somebody else telling you all these things we're going to give you with absolutely no way to pay for it. They just make the statement. And it works half the time for each of them. So, like everybody with the class action, it's not enough money. And they want to avoid a monopoly. Monopoly's illegal. You do want to avoid a monopoly. Very, very good reasons historically why federal laws added that law that didn't used to be there. So when you come and look at the money being paid, right, there's one thing on the history of business, and price is set by the market. Nothing else sets price. Nothing. Not revenues, not debts, not assets, not longevity, not even talents. Those would all seemingly be good things to go in when you're negotiating and trying to get market value, but they don't directly set the value. The market does. And it's wildly important that you understand somebody like Erik, because he's coming in and saying Ultimate Fighting Championship is not paying enough. Therefore, there's a monopoly and it's unfair and there's nothing else the fighters can do. When he's confronted with the idea that they are paying market value, Chachery would not tell you any different. Scott Coker would not tell you any different. Don Davis at the PFL, they won't tell you any different. The UFC is paying market value. When they come to us and we can give the same thing and we can trade them around as long as the contract is up, and we can all do our best to find the matchups that we think are the most compelling, that we can work with the most. That's the business, right? Very straightforward. But when you have somebody like Erik who is arguing that the UFC should pay more, okay, how much more? And I've seen him lay it out. It's about 300%. By Erik specifically, he believes it should be 50-50. He's got it all worked out. It has nothing to do with market value. It only has to do with revenues that come in, but this is how we're going to. He has about 50%, and he has it estimated that it's around 17% right now. This is our good friend Erik. So based on what Erik thinks it is, based on what he thinks it should be, I'm rounding up, but he thinks it's about 3 times as much. Now, his argument for that is the UFC can afford it. Not market value. Not the one thing that sets the market in absolutely every single market. He believes the UFC can afford it. That's it. He's right. He's right. They can. So what he wants to avoid, right? He wants to get the fighters paid a lot more money, but he wants to avoid a monopoly. UFC pays market value. UFC set the market. They're the ones that raised it. But in fairness, it's what everybody else pays to. Broad stroke, very fair. If they paid 3 times more, the other people could not compete. If the UFC paid what they could afford to pay, which is to crush and disrupt the market by 300%, according to our friend Erik, nobody else would be able to compete, and that very principle would create the monopoly that he allegedly would like to stop. And nobody involved in this, and you gotta understand it's a big act, right? Everybody's pretending. Everybody's pretending, but very often in court, whoever lies the best wins. Very often in court. So this is a big act. Like the attorneys involved that are taking, they don't actually think there's something wrong here. And none of the fighters actually think they were slighted. And that'll surprise you. There's other things that you'll hear from fighters, and I'll get some calls. Chael, how could you think? This is an act. No one actually thinks that they were not paid enough money. Problem came when they found out how much the company made. They don't believe that they weren't paid enough money. Nobody believes that. Every single person, I do mean that literally, that signed a UFC contract celebrated. 100%. That's not kind of a broad stroke or gender-based or weight-based or even the year that you did it. 100% of people that signed a UFC contract celebrated. Somewhere along the way, they started counting their partner's money. And that's a mindset. If you do that, you will not have success. This isn't Chael's opinion. I'm sharing with you to challenge yourself right now and find an example. Find a neighbor, find a family member, find a friend, find yourself personally. If you subscribe to the mindset, or if you know somebody that subscribes to a mindset of counting their partner's money, they do not have success. That's true. It's a mentality, right? Broke is a state of bank account. Poor is a state of mind. So don't ever count your partner's money. I'm just giving you a little piece of friendly advice, but people do it all the time. But it is relevant if we're going to tell a story, particularly like Erik. We know market sets price, and we know they're paying market value. So now we have to pretend. We have to pretend that we have been aggrieved. And we never had a problem with it until we found out how much they were bringing in. Okay, great. So now what you're talking about, and this is for everybody, this is 100% across the board, including Erik, who doesn't know basic legal definitions and thinks that Dana should call Francis and discuss fighting. What happens is you're discussing being a partner. We're talking about what you're bringing in, you're talking about a split. You start talking about a rev split. You're talking about us being partners. And there's no business out there where you get a percent if you didn't first write a check. And that's another one where these aren't Chael's rules. I challenge you. Tell me somebody. I know you didn't do it, but tell me somebody. Tell me a classmate. Tell me a relative. Tell me a friend. Tell me a neighbor. Tell me about a friend's neighbor's classmate that you heard about through the grapevine at a bunco game. You don't get to be partners if you don't first write a check. That's the way that works. But Erik thinks that you should. Okay, let's do that. Let's do it. Erik can't be a bad guy just because he hasn't made money and he's not involved and he's on the outside looking in. And I have a feeling he put a resume in somewhere and they shoot him away. I don't know what his gripe is. I don't know how he pretends to love MMA and hate the UFC. I don't fully understand that. But if we agree to what he's saying, then what we're agreeing to, make sure you understand this. If you want to be partners, you never want to take a check, you never wanted to write an investment. You actually want to live out your dream, you want to have fun, you want to get all the credit in front of the cameras. It took a whole team to set up. We work 365 days a year. You're going to have to work 3. But now I'm finding out that we're partners. That's weird, but okay. There's a litmus test, though. There's one test. It's a litmus test because this obviously is not law. This obviously is not the way that companies run. This is obviously not the point of going in and doing business and grinding it out every single day. Is to give 50% to somebody that shows up 3 times a year. Obviously, that's not the point, but we'll do it anyway if you're sincere. If that's really what you think. But I need you to answer one question. I need you to be honest. I don't feel you've been honest yet, Erik. But I need you to be here because I'm a part with a lot of money and I worked really hard for it. If we're partners, you never had a problem with pay till you started seeing and counting my money. If we're partners, you understand it's not all moonlight and canoes. If we're partners and we lose on an event, will you take less money? And the answer is no. And if you're a real partner, not only would you take less money, many times you take no money. If you're a real partner, not only would you take less money and sometimes no money, you'd have to write a check. And that's the litmus test. Do you want the guarantee that was market value, that we negotiated, that we shook hands, and that you celebrated when you got? Or do you want to be partners? You didn't want to be that day. Now you do. Are you willing to go all the way? And that's wherein lies the problem every time. I had a gentleman lay out on Twitter, and he talked about fighters don't only fight 3 times a year. It's every day. It's 2 months of training camp, and there's nutritionalists, and there's dietitians, and there's travel, and there's hotel. Every single word was true. There's hard work and damage to their body. Every single word was true. They're trying to get by, and they got managers, and they got trainers, and they got to give them a cut, and they got to pay Uncle Sugar, known as the government, the taxes. Every single word is true. And therefore, the organization should have to cover that. Now, that's a very sweet thing to say. It's a very kind and nice thing to say. It was said in response to the idea that an introductory fighter is paid $12,000 a show and $12,000 to win. He is going to get called to work 3 times a year. No more and no less. Now, they don't like the work 3 times. That kind of throws the math. It kind of throws everything off. And then they really don't like you're going to get called a maximum of 45 minutes. 45 minutes a year. That one really sets them off. So it's really important that you know they're training every day, and the dietitians and the nutritionists and the tape for their hands and the ice for their neck and all of these things, which are true. But let's just take your job. Whatever it is you do, let's just take your job. For you to do that job, quite literally, you need somewhere to live. If you don't have a place to live, the boss cannot expect to see you tomorrow for 8 hours. And the day after that, the day after that. Is that a literal statement? Am I right or what? Do you need somewhere to live to do that job? Yeah, you do. You sure do. What else do you need? You have to have. I'm not adding things here like dietitians and some of the stuff that you slipped at. What do you need? Well, you need reliable transportation. You got to be able to get there. That's realistic. You also need to be hygienic, right? Toothbrushes, sink, some hot water would be nice. Razor, no matter how inexpensive, but I need those. A lot of jobs actually require that. There's grooming. And then I'm going to need clothes on my back. I'm going to need to be comfortable. I'm going to need to eat something, right? If I don't eat anything for X amount of time, you can't expect me to come back. I will die. And the same thing goes with drink. So all of these things start to go in what you have to do for your job. And that's before you get into the fact that you'll go crazy if you don't have some form of entertainment. So why don't you write all those things down that you need? Legitimate things. Legitimate. You have to have them, or your boss cannot expect to see you 10 days from now. Take them to your boss and show him and tell him that's what you'd like to be paid. So you just did it with the fighters. You just talk about what they do every day and what they go through. And you didn't like that they get called 3 times a year for work. That bothered you. And you sure didn't like that they only got to work 45 minutes, right? You want to compare that to other sports. Comparing it to other sports is antitrust. It's very funny to hear this from people who are claiming a monopoly. It's called anti-trade, rather, not antitrust. To attempt to force somebody to adopt somebody else's business model is insane. It is literally insane. Generally, when you come into a business, you must adopt. It's called a standard of the industry. If you don't do it, you won't get the best and you won't stick around. You're going to have to raise capital. You're going to have to learn. You're going to have to figure things out. Every now and then you have somebody that will come into a market and do what's called disrupt the market. Those people go on to be written about. They go on to be taught about by professors in colleges to your kids. That's true. It's none of your business at all. I will literally hear that said. MMA to boxing. I think, why on earth? I heard this actually from Erik. Why on earth would you make that comparison, Erik? What do you mean? It's the closest thing there is. They're overseen by the same commissions. They're both combat. Okay, I'm not really sure what we're talking about. Like, both of those statements are true. They're overseen by the commission. They're both combat. Like, those statements are true. I'm wondering how we got there to a business model that needs to be followed. I'm wondering how a company today needs to adopt a business model from X amount of time ago. And who you are to enforce that and imply that. It's a very weird concept. I have friends that work at hospitals. They're volunteers. They're not paid. Park in a parking lot, go inside, up an elevator, put in 8 hours. I have other friends that work at the same hospital. They park in the same parking lot, they go up the same elevator, they go into the same rooms, work with the same patients, they're doctors. They make about $300,000 a year. And I find it to be very rude that you would question one or the person that assigned them or gave them that time slot, or what their motives were, or look at how much the hospital brought in and decide that they shouldn't even have volunteers. I would think that's very rude. I think that that's none of your business. And when I hear people suggesting that a certain business model has to be followed because somebody else did it, there's nothing in life that works that way, including the job that you have, including if you became an entrepreneur and gave out jobs. You will never want somebody that didn't buy in and didn't invest and didn't take a risk to be in on the profit. On the other side, if you're a great leader and your idea is not working out, you're going to cover the spread and you're going to take care of your team. They came in and did what you asked them to do, whether your idea was good, bad, indifferent, or got interrupted by a world pandemic known as the coronavirus. If you're a true leader, you will cover the spread. You'll keep your mouth shut and you won't complain. You'll keep working those days and they will be endless. But that's the deal. And it was never a problem what the deal was. It was never a problem in 2005 when it became the highest paying organization in the world, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Wasn't a problem in 2010 when they upped their minimum 3 times, or 2023 when they've upped their minimum 6 times. There's no company out there that you know of that you could name. It could be anybody. It could be your brother's barber shop up the road. There's no company out there that you know that you could name that has upped their floor 6 times. 2005 to 2023. There is no sport out there. You love to make the sports comparison, which is not how business works, but you love to do it. There's no sport out there where you can get 12,000 and 12,000, a minimum, an absolute minimum. You could get it 3 times a year when you divide that by the fact that you will work 45 minutes or less and have bonus incentives on top of all of that. There is no business out there, if you just want to talk about practices and principles, that you'll be able to find. You couldn't name, I'm challenging you. Name one. Lie to me. How would I know? Par Lumber up the road. Name one. You won't even do it. That gives and signs you to a contract, a binding contract, and never once has only paid you what the contract called for. Never one time did you get a check that was only for what the contract called for. And never once was it ever a problem or even a thought or a lawsuit or a discussion or anything other than a celebration until you saw what they were making. You didn't have a problem with your money or your treatment or the honesty or the timeliness or the work environment or anything. You had no problem with it. You had a problem with someone else having success. That's the truth. That's the way this really happened. You don't want to be partners. You want to take their money. You don't want to admit of the 767 guys under contract, 760 of you are interchangeable mediocrities. That's not nice when I say that. That's a reality. The guy being 12 and 12 that's complaining that he was paid 12 and 12 cost the company 12 and 12. He did not make it back. And on his next one at 15 and 15, he cost the company 15 and 15. He did not bring it back. And somewhere down the road, if you do this enough times, there's apparently a recipe that one guy on earth figured out how to do, where there's other 6 can cover the spread for absolutely everybody. And you don't want to be a partner, and you don't really want to get invoiced for what you did, and you don't really want to see what your numbers are. You want to go in there, you want to fight George St. Pierre that's going to feed everybody, including you. And you don't ever want to have to say thank you. Or you want to be like Erik that's got nothing to do with MMA. Has never made a dollar, never risked a dollar. Talking about the business of MMA. Comes out, tells me that there is not a legality against one promoter going and speaking to a signed athlete of another promoter. And the most basic question of, hey, Erik, let's just say you missed that law. It's glaringly obvious, and allow me to tell you what it's called. It's called contractual interference. But let's just say you missed the law. Let's follow the laws of logic, Erik. Why would I sign a guy if he wasn't my guy? Why would I sign a guy if somebody else could come talk to him? Why would I sign a guy and work with him if he wanted to go talk and work with other people? And that's where just on the basic laws of logic, you would be stuck. But Erik out of Canada, he had an answer for it.